Polyphia have returned with a brand new single, and it's called Power in the Blood. A suitably dramatic and epic sounding name, and this is also accompanying the announcement that we're going to get the 5th full studio album by Polyphia, and it's going to be called Be Not Afraid. Now, I have an interesting relationship with Polyphia. I really like some of their music. And when I say, like, I haven't heard ever, like, a Polyphia song that I don't like. I wonder whether or not it's simply because my primary musical output is I'm a singer, right? And I love singing along to stuff. I don't mean to do it, but I just do all the time. In fact, talking of, I have also recently released a song with my band Low Flow. I will put a link in the description. Check out the song Wings. But anyway, as a result, I don't often find myself gravitating too much towards instrumental music. I like it. I can appreciate the skill behind it. There's a time and a place, etc., but I don't often find myself seeking it all that much. I like the song Goats, Playing God, those songs, you know, they're just so interesting, especially when they first started releasing stuff. Polyphia were unlike much other music I was listening to at the time, so they were pretty awesome, but I have found myself kind of floating in and out of how interested I find myself. They were at Download a couple of years ago when I was there, and I did go and see them, and again, I was very impressed. It's extremely, like, satisfying just to watch those dudes create that art, you know, live, just seeing everybody doing all these intricate parts. In fact, oh god, I'm sure everyone who's watching this has seen that video where I think it was the drummer's click track, or his monitor went out during a live show, and he did the rest of the show with the stagehand grabbing the back of his ankle from behind the stage and tapping out the metronome for him. Insane stuff. I'm curious whether or not this next album cycle is going to trigger like a kind of stylistic change up or not. So we do have a quote from them, or a couple of quotes actually. So apparently the band has been heading down some pretty dark rabbit holes to come up with the material for the 5th release. Fair enough. So Tim Henson said, instead of going wide on Be Not Afraid, we went as deep as we could. There are so many layers to pull back. Every time you listen to it, you'll notice something new. Thematically, it's by far our most meaningful record we've ever made. Interesting. I would have said that the whole, like, zoom in just to see how crazy complicated Polyphia's music is has already been a thing to me. You know, I think almost every song of theirs I've ever heard bears multiple repeats where you can just focus on one part. If you just spend an entire song listening to the bass, you'll hear new stuff. That is absolutely a big feature of their music. So I'm curious how that manifests itself in them, like, really doubling down on that specifically. They also, I mean, this one's a little interesting. We physically can't make the same album twice. I don't know if that's a stab at somebody in particular, but I feel like most bands aren't like, yeah, you know what, we just really love making the same old shit, but whatever. So we have a yearning to evolve. It was so much fun to write this one together. The writing sessions for past Polyphia records typically looked like us gathering our ideas separately first and bringing them to each other second. So we took a different approach with Be Not Afraid by treating the sessions like an opportunity to create with everyone in the room first before getting into the separate writing. Now that is quite interesting. Now I have not looked this up recently, so this is based possibly on old information, but my understanding of how Polyphia worked was, to start with, I thought that Tim Henson did a lot of the, you know, the main songwriting stuff, and actually I thought a lot of the music for Polyphia was actually kind of notated out, almost written like a kind of scientific paper. You know, somebody's brain is just figuring out all these crazy rhythmic changes and how these instruments are going to interact with each other, and it's almost a case that after those sort of pieces were written, people kind of had to go off and learn them, almost, you know, almost like playing in an orchestra or something like that. So, I mean, I might not be 100% right on that one, but if that's the case and they're now changing their writing style to be more of a kind of traditional jam session, I am actually really interested to see what that does to their music. Does it lose a layer of intricacy and instead gain like a kind of more emotional hook, a little bit more coherence maybe? That is something I'm actually really, really curious to hear. So we've had another couple of other little lines. Henson said, the album takes you through the extremes of two different worlds and moods, one being very uplifting and triumphant, the other one being spine-chilling and terrifying. Okay, that's pretty. I'm down. You've definitely got me interested. again, I haven't listened to like I pay attention when Polyphia release stuff, but I've not been like, whoa, let me smash the new album into my ear holes. So we'll see whether or not me, as a more casual Polyphia listener, I'm able to discern any meaningful changes. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to watch this song through, I'm going to cut, I'm going to skip around, we're going to pause and talk about anything that's interesting. So if you do want to hear the entire song uninterrupted, because I am going to pause it a lot, then I will link the original in the description below. So go check that one out, come back here, and we can figure out what makes this song tick together. So let's pop on the old earphones, or whatever they're called, and listen to Power in the Blood. They always find such interesting locations to film. Look at that. That's awesome. In fact, I think if I'm not mistaken, I actually saw that this was filmed in like it's like a Swedish, I don't know, church or something like that. Am I going to have to look this up separately? I am going to have to look this up separately, aren't I? São Francisco de Penitencia Church in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Cool. 17th century masterpiece of lavish interiors and all of that good stuff. God, I wonder what the the process is to try and get permission to film in somewhere like that. That is badass. I'd love to have the sort of power, influence, location scouts, money to be able to do that. Anyway, back to the music. Okay. Right out of the gate, that guitar tone is definitely feeling slightly rockier, bit gainier, a little bit more grit, some more distortion. Honestly, when I think of Polyphia, I think of usually quite clean, maybe a little bit echo-heavy guitar tones, and that is most certainly a little dirty, a little rockier, which, to be fair, generally speaking, would actually be more towards my taste. So we'll see if that's a trend that persists over the rest of the song. Yeah, same with the bass, actually. The bass is way more distorted than I'm used to with these guys. It does feel rawer. I wonder if that is part of this new kind of writing style sort of symptom. That is interesting. It does feel a little less intricate, but more coherent. It feels like the three instruments, or the three guitarists at least, are like kind of following similar ideas closer together than maybe other music of theirs. There's slightly less kind of like call and response pulpits in and out. Everyone's kind of following this same idea. And again, the bass line also really quite distorted, like more than I'm expected. It kind of feels, and I don't know whether or not, again, I'm kind of biasing myself because I know that they're writing it differently, but it feels like maybe they're kind of leaning into a slightly more maybe hip-hop inspired feeling with the drums as well. Everything's a little more distorted, a little more kind of like synthy in tone. I don't know if I like it or not yet, to be fair. Well, I guess we'll have to give it more of a chance. I like the visuals. Also samples, that is, I mean, I'm sure it's not new for them, but not that common to have, like especially, like, of course, the entire song to have sort of vocal samples being put in and out. I quite like it. It gives you kind of something to latch on, a kind of focal point to kind of break up what could otherwise sometimes turn into something that's a little feeling of repetitiveness. Oh. Okay. Yeah, just the way they came out of that little section there. I was about to say this bit's like a bit more chill, a bit more spooky, the way that the kind of like tones are. And then suddenly you have this like big crazy fill, this big tap off that kind of sends you all the way up again, and then you get that really, really distorted bass in there. Drums start kicking in again a little bit. It does have a really nice flow to it. The way that they're able to just using these fills and these little moments of like technique to kind of like transition between these different sections, which is something that, you know, often bands rely on vocals to do, which they don't have access to. So, you know, the way that they're able to do that, it does, I mean, I think I read somewhere else in that article that they were actually singing some of the lines to each other to try and kind of help with the writing process. It kind of does almost feel like some of those guitar lines are kind of functioning like a vocalist in the way that they kind of lead you through the sections of the song. It's very, very impressive. It always is with Polyphia, but every time I come back to them, I'm like, God damn, they are good. Ooh. Yeah, definitely more kind of like fractured as a feeling. Like there are definitely some bars in here that have got some strange time signatures and they're flipping around a lot. These sections are all very much sort of like their own thing. But again, everyone is significantly more coherent than I'm used to. Ah, I like that. See, again, I forgive my ignorance if I'm wrong on this one, but I don't feel like I've seen many times where Tim has busted out an acoustic. Actually, I think they're both playing acoustics of some sort, right? They kind of bust out an acoustic for a section. I'd love to see how they do that live because everything moves so quickly, but the tonal shift that brings to this song is really, really nice. It's that light and dark thing they were talking about, right? It's like totally shifted it. And again, you know, I mean, I've seen Henson doing collaborations with like Marcin and stuff like that, where it's a lot more kind of acoustic and tappy and got that kind of Spanish feeling to it. But it's nice to see them incorporate that into this song, and it feels very natural the way they transitioned out of it. It kind of went from like a almost like kind of punky in its like kind of grit. It's got a bit of grunge to it, like super high concept technical grunge, of course, but kind of like the tones that were being used and some of the kind of attitude, just the way that that bass was hitting together to kind of open out into this. Really nice. And whilst we're on it as well, color palette is gorgeous. This, I'm possibly just making it up, but this to me looks like maybe it's filmed in Japan or something like that, even though, no, I mean, okay, fine, I feel like I've been baited. There's no way that the grass is actually red. Okay, but still, I really like that, the way that they kind of like flip between this very like ornate golden kind of religious imagery, and then they kind of swap out the total opposite of that, and you're outside, and you've got the white and the red, which is still kind of got a bit of a papal feeling to it, you know, sort of like, you know, if you go to the Vatican, you're going to see lots of white and red combined, but it kind of outside, it's they've always had nicely shot videos, but this one is particularly good. Yeah, okay, that's definitely not actually red. I'm such an idiot. Ooh. Okay. I wonder if that was them playing that backwards then. Was that, or was that just him doing an effect? I'm not 100% sure. But still, the transition back into that, and then you've got the kind of like drums again. I'm assuming it's about to hit another like really crazy, super intricate, like maybe heavier section now. But the way that they pull these things apart and back together is very, very pleasing. All them taps. There's also some synth stuff going on in the background, which I'm not used to hearing on Polyphia either, I don't think, which again adds that kind of like dark feeling to it. Ooh. Ooh. Oh. Oh, okay, that riff just gave me shivers. The way that that transition in there, the like time change there, the rhythmic change there, it's also goddamn fluid, but actually that was really nice. It started looking like it was going to be just like a little flexy, you know, sort of fill, and it turned out that this is now the next section. God, that gave me, oh yeah, no, that was excellent, that. Just again, the way that the bass or the kick drum is like used, I mean, they visually signify it with the kind of like strobe effect on there with every time he hits that kick, but also it is actually interacting with this very intricate guitar line from Tim there. Every time that drum kick hits, he's actually stopping for a second. It's kind of like segmenting it up. It kind of gives it almost like a bit of a hip-hop feel, like I said earlier. Kind of does bring bands like Sleep Token to mind a little bit. I know that I think probably it's a really easy comparison nowadays. Any sort of rocky metal thing that's got even vague sort of like hip hop or electronic feels to it is an easy comparison. But I hear that, and especially with the kind of gothicness of it too. But just you can, again, that's that coherence, right? The way that they will put that together. You can tell that when Tim was writing that line, he was in the same room as the drummer, and they were going, oh wait, okay, if I hit that offbeat there with that drum, you stop out for a second. It kind of makes it this kind of weird, almost stuttering feeling. It's really cool. It has a kind of glitchy feeling to it, which must be intentional, but very clever. I will say I'm not a huge fan of that bass tone. It's too blown out for me. It's too distorted. It feels like I'm standing too close to a speaker in a nightclub. What is going on? It's definitely still got that kind of like glitchy feeling. I really like some aspects of it, and I mean, it feels like it's building up to something. It's very much got this kind of like final chorus, climactic feeling to it. Just watching the drummer try and keep up the hi-hat hits at the same time that Tim is tapping is like kind of insane. Okay. They just really progged the out for the ending of that song. What is this, the album announcement, I'm guessing? Yeah. Okay. I have mixed feelings about that. I mostly really liked the turn. I think I did like how coherent it all felt. The way that those parts interact was way less sort of intricate. It doesn't have this kind of like beautiful mind savant kind of like, mass stuff floating up in the air every time someone's doing something feeling to it. It was a bit more like they were in the room when they were writing it together, which is nice. It feels more like a kind of band and less of an experiment or a project, which is nice. Some of those like rhythmic changes were beautiful. A couple of the tonal changes were really good, but I just didn't like the tone used in the bass for, to be honest, large portions of that. It was too blown out. I see what they were going for with that, and the other aspects of it, we'll just not be lightsaber, the other aspects of that, like the guitar tones that were used that were way less clean than I'm used to with Polyphia, way kind of grungier, got this kind of like grittier feeling to them. I like that, but I think they maybe took the bass tone just slightly too much to the extreme. It kind of never felt, because the music is still quite intricate, right? But they're having that kind of like very heavy distortion on the bass kind of made it feel messy, like it was incomplete, like you couldn't quite pull those parts together. I mean, that last section was pretty impressive. I really liked the way that they kind of like slowed down and kind of like it was really down to just those riffs. They kind of, it feels like they kind of took it in turns to take a little lead there in like a kind of small section, and everything was kind of like almost there. It's like pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. It kind of has this kind of drawn out epic quality to it, which I really like. I am definitely down with this direction. I'm going to need to see a few more songs to see whether or not my suspicions are correct, that maybe this kind of like slightly more modern era kind of like metal fusion stuff that's been going on a lot recently, whether or not that has bled into their sound a little bit. And that's, that's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just down to your taste. I mean, I happen to really like President, who definitely have large aspects of that incorporated into their music, despite the fact that I don't listen to loads of hip-hop on my own. But it definitely can be worked. It's just down to whether or not it works in this specific implementation, I guess. So I'd be curious to see whether or not those tones are consistent with the rest of the album. I do like the kind of light and dark. The acoustic section was very nice, unexpected as well, but I like the way that it kind of pulled out for a second. It took something that was otherwise really quite intense a long way through that. Just gave it a moment to breathe. Just had a sort of like audio shift up with some tones. So I really like that section as well. It was good. I am very curious. Also, the music video was beautiful. I really like the visual aspect of the grass and the outside stuff compared to the church, and that was a beautiful set. I also, God, just thinking of the logistics of that, I mean, obviously, especially because they're not, there's no vocals, I guess no one is plugged in, of course, but you can't not have a plugged-in drum kit. And I did notice he had mutes on his pads, but even still, I would have thought any art curator or, sort of like art historian who's got anything to do with this crazy church is like, you need to play those drums quietly. If you hit that drum slightly too hard and a statue of Jesus falls off a shelf, you're in the shit. I guess, they're insured. But anyway, I was really quite interested in that, but as I said before, I'm not that far down the Polyphia rabbit hole, so I'd be curious, you guys who are watching this right now, who are massive Polyphia heads, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you think this is an interesting evolution? Do you think it's more of the same? Am I being overcritical of the tones? Is this something they've been doing for a while? I don't really know, so let me know in the comments. I'd be very curious. If you did like the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps us to grow, and like I said in the beginning, my band Low Flow has got a song out. It's called Wings. We put a lot of effort into it. We've got a new EP coming up, so if you would listen to that as well, it would make me very happy. Otherwise, have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.